Hey everybody, and welcome to Train Signal. And now that you have a pretty good understanding of what SQL Server installation is all about, it's time to work on a more advanced type of installation, and these are going to be the command line installations. Now, there's more than one way that you can install SQL Server. The command line, you can do it just with the command line switches, you can do it with a config file, and you can do it with a combination of both. The first thing we're going to talk about is using the command line switches, but I'm telling you, I'm not going to spend much time on this because up front, I don't get to one if you wanted to. These you have to have an action install. That's the action that we're going to take this time. This one, I love this parameter. I always have. I accept SQL Server license terms. I love that almost run-on sentence type of parameter because I could have just said license terms or a license, but they had to put I accept SQL Server license terms. That just makes me laugh every time. Okay, so update source. And this is a really good one because if you have different service packs or different cumulative updates, or CUs as we call them, then you can actually have those folded in to your main install at the time, and you don't have to worry about installing SQL and then patching it later. You can have it patched at the same time that you're installing it to the exact service pack level that you want. So that's a really nice feature. Now, this is why I don't like the command line install. There are two main reasons. Number one, because the command line is just a run-on sentence. It's like any other DOS command line. It's just a call to an exe and then just a series of parameters that are just endless. I've got word wrap turned on here. Where is it? Here. If I turn it off, every one of these will be on the same line and it'll just go on forever, right? Let's put word wrap back on. But that's the problem with these command line installs. In order to find anything, you've got to search through an endless sea of parameter values. So let's just take a look at what this would look like. This is just a very simple command line that I pulled off of the internet. So by the way, don't use these two command lines standpoint. So all you do is go through the wizard and it writes those choices to the file as you go. And then you hit cancel at the end so you don't run the install. And now you have a config file with all of the choices that you made. And you can make them in the GUI instead of having to make them at the command line like we did just a minute ago. So now let's go take a look at the config file install. So here we are back in our VM, and I've pulled the configuration file, or the config file that setup created for me, and I renamed it to config file raw. And now I have the new version of the config file. So let's go ahead and take a look at the raw version and see what it gives us. You can automatically see that the format is much better than the command line because every option is on a single line, and they've even got comments in here on things that you can do on options that the options you can choose. So automatically this is a lot better off. So here we have quiet mode is false. We have simple quiet is false. This is just the default, right? We have UI mode as normal, so that it's going to bring up the UI and we're going to have to make some choices. But here we have the features. These are all of the features that we chose last time. And here, even from BOL, you can see here's IS, sorry, it does the whole line. Here's IS, here's RS, right? Here's full text, here's replication, here's SQL engine. So all of the choices we made to install are here, including our install shared directories, including the distributed replay name, the controller name, and of course the paths to the working directories for the controller. But there are some things that the setup doesn't put in the config file. And of course, those things are, I accept SQL Server license terms. It does not put that in there. And it doesn't put any passwords in there. So think about it from Microsoft's standpoint. They want you to accept the license terms, but of course, they also want you to know what the license terms are. So they can't just default to having you accept it, because if they did, then you can say, hey, I didn't even know that existed. And from the password standpoint, that's just good practice, right? This config file is in clear text, and quite often people don't go in and clean up the log directories and make sure that all of this stuff is gone. So if they were to script the passwords like the SA password or your service account passwords, anybody that has access to that directory can go in there and see your passwords, and you may not even know about it, right? So it's really better for everybody concerned if Microsoft doesn't put the passwords in the config file. Now let me go show you the new one that I created. It's not much I know that there's something that requires my attention instead of having to check in on it an hour later. So for that reason, I just don't do it this way. Now I'm going to hit cancel because we've got other stuff to talk about. Now that's only one way to kick off the configuration file, right? In the next section, we're going to talk about how to combine the command line and the config file methods to give you, oh, let's go ahead and call it the ultimate setup experience. Let's go ahead and do that. Okay, combining command line and config file installs. This is where you're going to get to see how cool this is. So there's really nothing wrong with launching a config file install from the GUI like I just showed you, but it's not very rich. It's better than doing it manually, and it's a lot better than doing it from the command line by specifying all your own options, but it just isn't rich. You can't go any further launching the config file from the GUI than just that. If it's in the config file, those are the options you chose, and if it's not, then that's it. You can't make any decisions. You can't have anything done automatically. So now let's go ahead and get into how you can make the setup experience really, really rich. And like I promised you at the beginning, and don't make any changes whatsoever, then your setup will actually error out. Let me show you why. Let's come back to the config file, and I'll use my version because I didn't change that. And let's go down here and let's find these directories. Let's see, where are we? Here we are. These two directories right here, the result directory and the working directory. It's very subtle wording in BOL, but these have to exist already. The setup routine, when you do the GUI install, creates these directories for you, but when you do a command line install, you have to do it yourself. So it makes sense that we have to create these directories ourselves. So let's go ahead and put that in our install right above, since we know we have to have them created already. So I'm going to say make directory. There, I'm going to save it. I'm compulsive about saving. And then let's get the other one. Ah, there it is. The working directory. I'll take this. I'll put this in my install. My directory. There we go. So I got the result directory and the working directory, and I'm going to save that. Now, if you just had a regular, if you wanted to change these, if this were something that you wanted to be different on every single box, then you could move these to the top of the config file to remember to change them every time if you didn't want to script this. But since we're going to script it, then the smarter thing to do is to put them in here, and then you can just change them in here if you need to. But it's really not a good idea to do that. You really want everything to be in the same place as much as possible. And that's the kind of thing that you'll coordinate with your Windows guys and your disk guys. When you get a request for a new SQL Server box, you'll tell your Windows guys and your SAN guys, I need these LUNs, I need them to be these size, I need them to be, this drive letter or this mount point, and you'll have the same ones for every single one. So if you're going to put a distributed replay client on every single box, or if you're going to put a specialized location for TempDB on every box, then you'll have the same LUNs set up for every box. And it's really a much better way to manage your SQL Server environment, because the more things change, the more they stay the same. If you have the same LUN for TempDB or for your backup directory on every single server, then you automatically can answer certain questions without even thinking. And you get these questions all the time. People say, hey, where are my backups going? Or hey, what drive is TempDB on? You automatically know the answers to these questions because they're the same across the board. So anyway, all that is to say that we're going to hard code these directories in here because we want them to be the same on all of our installs. And it may not be C, but in this case it will be because it's the only drive I have. Let's make a couple more lines. Now, if you'll remember, there's also one more thing we have to do. We also have to take care of our setup prereq of installing .NET 3.5.1. And you remember how we installed the .NET framework? We used PowerShell for that, right? So we're already in PowerShell. This is where, in the last lesson, I told you that that was going to be a much better, a much richer way to install the framework than going through the GUI. And now that's actually going to pay off. So let's go ahead and add that to it now. Add Windows feature, ASNet framework. Okay, we've got that portion taken care of. I'm going to Control S on that. So we've got one more thing to do for our basic install. Okay, two more things. The first thing is, remember when we added the framework, we had to install the Windows modules. So the first thing we did was we went to Windows PowerShell modules, either here if you've already gone there, or under Admin Tools. Where is it? There we go. Under Admin Tools right there. But we also went to it directly from here, from the command prompt, where we installed the server manager, right? So we're going to do that here. So we have to import module, server manager. I'm going to Control S on that. Now we more or less have a complete install script right now. So we can go ahead and kick this install off. In fact, let's do that. Let's switch back to the command line. And let's kick off this install. We're going to get rid of this, I hope. Here we go. Okay. And now we just need to call this PowerShell script that we started up. Let me save that one last time just to make sure. And now let's get the path. So it's in C, SQL install, and it's called install.ps1. So from here, we just need to say C:\\. Install/. Now when we hit go, it should work just fine. Ah, yes. Okay, so I'm glad this came up because PowerShell doesn't run scripts by default. When you install a fresh version of Windows like we have here, unless you go do something about it, you can't run PowerShell scripts. So we do have one other step that we actually can't script, and that's turning on scripts. And it's really easy to do. We just have to set the execution policy. And let's set it to remote signed. Tell it going to see the directories being created, and then you're going to see the SQL setup start. Okay, and here are the directories. You can see this directory was created, then the result directory, then the working directory was created, and now you can see the SQL setup kicking off. See? You can see it kicking off right here. Okay, and look at this. We have an error. It says setting configuration file is not recognized, but that's not really what it says. It says the setting configuration, not configuration. Now, I did this on purpose to prove a point. The command line install that we started this section with, you would have this type of error again and again and again and again and again and again if you use just the regular command line install with the command line switches. This is why I don't like this very much. If you were sharp, you caught that when I typed it into the script. So let's get past that. It's going to fail. See, and now it's writing to the summary log. Now we have to come back here and say configuration file. There we go. Instead of that was to close this and open up just the plain PS1 file, which you can see doesn't have any of our changes in it. So I need to put the R there, and then I need to come back up here and comment these guys back out again. Just like that. So you notice we were seeing some signs, some telltale signs that something was wrong, right? It kept giving us the same error message. It wasn't respecting our comment when we commented out these make directories. It said that the directories already existed. So you can see we had, there was something wrong there. And when we see install.ps1.txt up here at the top, and then we come in here and we can see that that has been recreated. In fact, let's delete that. And we can see that it had been recreated, then I knew instantly what was wrong. I should have closed that file to begin with. And again, I love for you guys to see stuff like this because it just shows you the kinds of problems you can have when you script. So while it's a lot more touchy, right, than the GUI is, there are a lot more rewards. So every single script building session is like this. You try something, you make a mistake, you fix it. You try something, you get it slightly wrong, you fix it, and you keep going on and on and on until you get the exact setup experience you want. It's not that hard. You can see it can just be touchy. So let's clear the screen again, and let's see if we actually get what we're looking for this time. There. Just go away. So now that that's running on its own, let me show you something else we can do. There's one more thing we need to take care of, or we may need to take care of from the config file. We come down here. I'm going to run a search on this instead. I'm going to search for the box name. There it is. You remember this distributed controller name that I like to give the name of dist replay and then the box name. Now that's as a parameter of your command line. Going to be if you want to connect to a certain box. So you can count on either changing this every single time, changing the box name right here every single time you run an install, or you can take advantage of the power of PowerShell and have that do that for you. Let's go ahead and see what I mean. So let's go ahead and start by opening up a different PowerShell window because we're going to experiment a little bit. And let's see if we can get the computer name. Will that do it? Okay, good. I got the computer name just by doing that. Let's go ahead and set that to a variable. Let's say name. Actually, there's a better way to do that. Up arrow, and then home. Name equals. There. Okay, good. So now I have it in a variable. And again, when we get to the section of the course where For one final check, we like to go down here and see passed, 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 passed. We like to see that all the way across the board. Everything passed, so we have a successful install of SQL Server. Let me go. Here we are, everything passed. I'm going to say OK. You can see here it does another setup support rule check. Tell it OK. You're going to enter the product key, agree to the license terms, select the instance that you want to upgrade. Of course, we've only got one instance on this box. Addition upgrade rules. They all passed. Now we're ready to upgrade the addition. Now, again, we have our config file that we could go to and have that scripted. If I hit upgrade now, it'll go ahead and upgrade. I'm not going to because I'm on developer right now and I don't have an enterprise level CD put in the, or DVD put in the drive. So it wouldn't do me any good to run through the upgrade. So I'm gonna click cancel, but it really only takes a very short time. Now, one more thing I want to show you. If I can get this to go over to install, there we go, is to upgrade from an earlier version. You could only upgrade 2 behind, so in this case, SQL 2005, and I think you have to be on SP4 to do it. However, to go through the upgrade process, now I'm not going to get much love here. Long. So I'm going to go ahead and cancel out of this. Close out all this. Okay, we are done with setup. You now know how to set up through a GUI, and you know how to set up through all of the versions of the command line. There's a lot more to set up than I showed you here. There are actually different types of setup as well. We never saw a clustered setup or a sysprep setup, and we never saw a lot of the options come into play. But this will get you more than started, and you can explore a lot on your own.